Hello everyone, and in one of my previous videos you could have seen that I had an interview with a volunteer ranger from Richmond Park. However, in this video I only used a small part from this interview. So stay tuned now to see the full interview I had with this guy who's doing some volunteer work in Richmond Park.
My name's Duncan MacCallum. I'm one of the volunteer community rangers here in Richmond Park.
And how come you became a volunteer ranger here in Richmond Park?
I've always had a love for nature, and I grew up in the North Downs in Surrey, and then made several visits to America, visiting the national parks, met with the rangers there, and was very encouraged by and excited by the fact that when you meet a ranger there, your visit to the park becomes something special. So the idea of a new group, the volunteer community rangers here for Richmond Park, seemed like a natural fit. And if we can transform people's visits into something special, that's a great thing to do.
So as a volunteer ranger, how would your day look like here in the park?
Well, we meet at the Ranger Lodge here, and then we go out in pairs together. And most of the people that we meet, we welcome them to the park, we talk to them about subjects they might be interested in, we discover what they've come to the park to do. Sometimes we might highlight where the deer are hiding at the time, or we might get them to look through our binoculars so they can see things that are distant much better. And we just generally try and make people have a more informed and engaging sort of visit to the park.
And what kind of things would you tell people then when they visit the park?
Depends on the season. So at the moment, a lot of the deer, the female deer, are giving birth, so they have young with them. So if we see dog owners and they're approaching deer where we know there are calves, the deer get quite protective at that time of year, so we encourage them to put their dogs on the lead. But other than that, most of the time it's giving people information, often using the map to try and guide them to places of interest that they might not be aware of. And sometimes just standing, talking about oak trees and explaining how old they are, and making people interested in simple things like the nature and wildlife.
And while I was walking around in Richmond Park, I noticed that the trees, they all have been kind of cut off at a certain length here. What's the reason why they're all, like, from the bottom part, there are no leaves anymore?
Well, that's how you can tell we're in a deer park. So in a deer park, the deer go up on their hind legs and they browse the bottom leaves, but they can only reach to about 2 meters. So you know you're in a deer park where every tree has a bottom that's cut to about 2 meters. And you can see in a panoramic here, that's a perfect example. So it's the deer, not us, that cut the bottoms of them.
And we normally talk here at Richmond Park, because it's a deer park, about the deer.
Mm-hmm.
But what other kind of wildlife can you expect to find here when you walk through Richmond Park?
Well, your usual suspects of badgers and rabbits and foxes. At night time you get owls and bats. On the edges of the park we have 2 nesting pairs of peregrine falcons. In the ponds we have substantial quantities of heron. We have lots of other ducks and Canada geese. I mean, there's a real myriad range of birds, and of course the all-important parakeets that are all over London, and they're here as well in the park.
Did anything recently happen during your work with what? Okay, it's a special job to be a volunteer ranger.
Yeah, I think almost every time we talk with people is a special time. We've never had an engagement with people where they felt angry towards us. They've always enjoyed the discussion, even if it's helping people to work out a different cycle route if they're off track. But often I met a young boy with his family, and he was incredibly enthusiastic about all sorts of species of deer, ranging from deer that you find in Africa through to elk and moose. I had to inform him we only had red deer and fallow deer, but even the discussion about that was very interesting, and certainly drained my knowledge of all the deer that we have here in the park.
Is there anything else in the park that you're really proud of, or a place that you really like to visit while you're working here in the park?
I think anywhere where I see the deer becomes a special place. Every time you see the deer, it just gives you a special feeling that you're in a huge city, one of the great cities of the world, and yet you're looking at deer in the wild and browsing, and whether there's a young being suckled by its mother, or whether the stags in the wintertime are fighting each other over the rights to a mate. It's always enchanting when the deer are involved, so it doesn't matter the location. I think it's the who's at that location that makes the difference.
Is there anything else that you want to share to people who are going to visit Richmond Park? Something they need to be aware of, something they have to visit, something they have to look out for? when they're here? It can be everything.
Well, it's a fantastic place to visit anytime. There's good parking in the outskirts, there's fantastic facilities for public transport, and we encourage people to tread lightly and therefore to use public transport or cycle here if they can. But the places to visit, there's the ponds, Isabella Plantation is a magnificent botanical plantation, and then just walking around the park and bumping into the deer left, right and centre, although we prefer people to stay 50 metres from the deer if they can. They're wild animals, they get a bit defensive and they prefer not to be fed. Some people try and feed them, and that's definitely one thing we would discourage if you see people doing that.
Is there anything else you still want to share?
Well, just that this is one of many royal parks. The royal parks, there are 8 of them across London, ranging from here, Bushy Park down the road, and all the way across to East London to Greenwich Park. It's a great time to come out. Summer's here, come out with your family and really enjoy nature at its best.
All right, thank you very much.